Ladies and gentlemen, it is at a drive-thru window that I actually had an epiphany about alternative energy. Drive-thru window, amazing, amazing thing. Local food produced to us, kind of questionably nutritious food, but we're able to get it and fuel our lives on the go. And today, we are constantly on the go. So I was sitting in the drive-thru, and the person in front of me in an electric vehicle actually had stopped, gotten local food, and is now on their way to their destination, fueling themselves for the day. Why couldn't the same thing be done for their car? So when I got back home, I started investigating into alternative energy. Now, I'm a conscientious capitalist, as I like to say it. I run a venture fund as well as being chief strategy officer for a data sciences company. A lot of deals come across my desk, a lot of them in clean tech and in alternative energy. So I've had the blessing actually to be able to look into this world a little bit, but I wanted to check my beliefs. So the first thing I did was look at, all right, how much production is going on out there from alternative energy sources? So I was surprised to find that only 9.8% of all of our energy is being produced by alternative energy. Think about some of the problems that plague alternative energy. The first is that, well, there's just not a lot of production that comes out of a single unit. If we look at how much land we actually need to put solar cells, macro wind, even micro wind, to actually create enough energy to make something different, well, it's huge. Inside of cities, it's not really that viable. In the places that I could actually put it that have all sorts of land available, well, I have to actually transmit that power over distance. Did you know today that every watt of power that comes out of your wall outlet actually took 1.5 watts to generate at the power station? Why? Because the transmission over distance loses that amount of power, but I still have to generate that out at that power station. That uses more fuel. So then for alternative energy, how am I supposed to transmit something from a production factory that doesn't make that much energy in the first place, and I'm going to lose a lot of it over transmission, let alone if I'm going to try and store it, industrial size battery capacity, the technology is just not there yet. But if I want to be able to make a huge difference, I need to look at something that's going to move the needle in a much larger way. Now, we look around at what the top consumers of actual fuel are, and number one, at 59%, are cars and light trucks, so SUVs, light trucks, passenger transportation vehicles. And second are heavy trucks, Class 8 tractor trailers, those types of things. They consume 22% of the fuel out there. Well, the holy grail, or turning everybody into electric vehicles, right? Turning cars, every car out there. Okay, well, again, the storage problem, transmission problem. Who's going to make the actual fuel that's going to come in and create those the power for those electric vehicles? Plus, there's 253.8 million cars on the road today. The average age of those cars? 11.4 years. Retroactively fitting those cars is actually not really going to be something that is viable. But maybe we'll fix the grid. We'll make that smart grid, right? And then power will eventually come with that. That's great. Well, last prospectus on that was $489 billion and 20 years to make the smart grid. Can't wait that long. So I kind of stepped back for a second and started thinking, well, what if we could do something in smaller, more manageable bites? And what about if the consumer of that, the target of that, was really going to be trucking? 22% of all energy usage, again, is through commercial trucking. Well, that's actually interesting because a truck actually drives an average of 112,000 miles a year. It produces 150 metric tons of CO2 every single year. So, that's interesting. And guess what? Businesses that have a profit motive to cut their costs because of fuel are the ones that will invest in these types of technologies because it will get a great return for them. Aha, there's something interesting there. So, if we really start to think about this, the name of the game really is miles per gallon. It's extending the miles per gallon of a truck. Because a truck can't go fully EV at a Class 7, Class 8 truck because it's just too much power to weight that you need to pull. It's just not going to be reasonable or realistic. However, if I'm able to make a hybrid truck that I'm able to actually fuel and offset the gas need and extend those miles per gallon, I can really find tremendous advantage there. So there's a few things that we look at when we think about how to go about this. Now, the first technology actually has absolutely nothing to do with alternative energy. It's actually all about dynamic shaping through aerodynamics. Now, what I have here in my hand is from a company called Actisys. Now, this is called an actuator. Now, there are two discs inside of here on either side, locked in this steel case. Now, what you probably can't see from all the way out there is there's a very tiny slit that sits right here. Now, this slit, when this is actually powered, it only takes about 20 watts of power to run this. That's it, much less than a light bulb. So now, when you begin to run this, you'll see that both sides of these discs begin to vibrate, and they pull in air and then push out air faster than they took it in, creating a turbo. Once they come into resonance, this little thing right here, at only 20 watts, will generate a wind blast of 200 meters per second. Well, when we think about a tractor-trailer, 63% of the fuel usage of a tractor-trailer is used to fight drag at highway speeds. That's because when you look at the gap between the tractor and the trailer, that's where it pulls in a lot of air. And then at the back, it creates kind of a suction zone that slows down the truck as well, creates more drag. So what we're able to do is take a series of these and put them around the outside of the actual top of the tractor and around the sides, right next to on either side of the gap. And then on the back, you push them or focus them towards the rear of the truck. Now, as the truck rises to highway speeds, energy that is generated by the truck, braking and those types of things, is pushed into this device and a stream of air comes out. And the effect is amazing. It actually changes that block as it moves through the air, and drag points that get sucked in, it actually reshapes it into a bullet. So what happens now is you've essentially completely streamlined the aerodynamics of that truck without reshaping the physical structure. That means it can be retrofitted to all of the trucks that are out there. And you can see anywhere from a 6% to an 18% reduction in fuel costs annually. That is a monster application. If you think about one of the biggest box stores out there, they have 60,000 trucks that actually consume $61,000 annually in fuel costs. That's $3.66 billion. If you can save from 6 to 18%, that's anywhere from about $250 million to $856 million in cash savings per year. Then you extend that out to CO2 and to barrels of oil. Huge. But we're not done there. And I kept thinking about that drive-through window, right? With the drive-through window, how am I going to be able to take fuel and get it locally to something? Well, back to our trucks, if we look at what's expanding in the interstate truck routes, by 2040, there's a huge amount of opportunity in open land where trucks just drive by every single day. What if we were able to take wind and solar and put it out into the spots where it can be closest to the consumer that drives right by it? Trucking. That's pretty interesting. We could have large farms of these things that actually produce energy. From there, we now have, maybe not industrial scale type of storage, just localized storage. But then the biggest challenge that we face is, how do I actually get the power to the truck as the truck's driving? Because a truck can't stop for 2, 3, 4 hours and actually recharge itself. It's just not realistic, right? It has to continue to roll. Well, the answer there is through an invention that was over 100 years ago by Nikola Tesla, magnetic induction. So now, magnetic induction is being commercialized and is actually turned into wireless electricity. I'm going to demonstrate that for you today. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to break out my demo here. What I have here is a set of coils on either side. Now, this has a power supply to it. This does not. There is no battery that is inside here. If I take this and I bring the field together, you'll notice it lights up. Now, if I turn it sideways, you'll notice there is nothing in between these two things, right? This normally freaks people out. If I bring this together, yes, I can actually put it through my head. Yes, it's possible. Because this is a magnetic field. We live in a magnetic field. We walk through magnetic fields every single day. The Earth has one. It's a pretty important job, too. Right? It's the same things here. It's 1,000,000 times less energy than actually making a cell phone call, which should make us think about cell phone calls. But at the same time, if I take this thing and I put it out to a certain distance, it starts to fade, right? The power is only good for so far. However, if I bring out a wireless repeater, no battery, just another coil inside of here, and I'm able to put that in front of this, I will actually double the distance of how that power applies. Now that becomes interesting, because I can start to chain these things, one after the other, after the other, after the other, and start to create a system that allows wireless electricity to be transferred into something that is in motion. That seems to be interesting. But this thing's tiny. How am I going to apply that to a truck or a car? Well, that's what this is. This is actually a real-life implementation of a pad that goes on the bottom of a car or a truck and into the road. This can actually be embedded in asphalt. It doesn't even have to be showing. It can be 2 inches under asphalt and still transfer energy. And a series of these can be placed along a road. So now, with that in mind, if we look at this truck, right? Now, on the bottom, I have one of the transceivers that we just talked about and demonstrated here. It's this white little box. Yes, that is taped on. I'm not much of a craftsman. So, if I have this at, let's say, the supplier, right? And here I have the truck sitting on top of it. I can actually charge the batteries as it's sitting and being loaded at the supplier. Right? So now, backed up, it's going to be sitting, not in motion. These things sit right underneath the asphalt, and now it's able to actually charge as it waits. That's pretty awesome. Now, as I'm driving down the road, you'll notice that the lights are off. That's because there's nothing in the road. It's running on the electrical energy it has, and it's stored in its batteries, and also on the fuel that it actually has, a normal petroleum-based fuel that it has inside of its system. But you're extending the miles per gallon. Now, let's say you get to a certain point, and you're outside in the rural areas and interstate trucking lines, and of course I've got my not to scale, wind turbines and my solar panels sitting out here. I even have my hippie homeless cows all hanging out, because they're free range. It's awesome. When the truck comes cruising up and it hits a certain segment in the road, the truck can now fuel itself using electrical energy as it goes, as you can see by the truck being lit up. Now, it gets to the other side, goes back to the normal road, runs on its power, and it gets to the supplier at the end. And once it gets to the supplier, it sits there and charges as it's being unloaded. So now, when it's ready to make its return trip, again, it has that fuel. So again, we're putting that fuel locally to a consumer that's coming to it without having to transmit it over time, without having to transmit it over distance. We can save anywhere from 16 to 30% of fuel. Well, if we start putting that in real terms, that's 854 million gallons of fuel that can be saved on the low end. That's 1.6 billion gallons of fuel that can be saved at the high end. In terms of CO2 production, 8 million metric tons of CO2 can be saved. 15.7 million metric tons at 30% savings. Now, those are all big numbers. Those sound really impressive, but how do I put that into context? Well, at a 16% fuel savings, I can actually take the equivalent of 1.7 million passenger cars off the road for a year. At 30%, I can take around 15.3 million cars off the road today. Now, in Boston, or Massachusetts, we have the tax holiday, right? It's a day that we can go out, we can buy cool TVs, tires, that sort of stuff, and we won't get taxed for it. Well, how would you like to take an oil holiday, an oil vacation? Because at 16% savings, that stops the use of oil for 12.4 days. At 30%, that's 24 days off of oil. We use 19 million barrels of oil a day. We wouldn't use a drop for that amount of time by looking at the system in this way. Now, we think about the word stimulus, right? Stimulus is actually an action that transfers energy and incites a larger set of action because of that initial set of energy. Now, if we think about government stimulus, right, there are pluses and minuses to some of that. But right now we have crumbling infrastructure. Our bridges, our roads are crumbling underneath us. However, if we just rebuild the roads, that's not really a stimulative act. It's really a bunch of temp jobs. Because we go out, we pave the road, fix the bridge. Business isn't going to take that and make a multiple effect for the economy because of that. However, if we start looking in a smaller perspective at some of these interstate trucking lines, and we're able to work in a public-private relationship, and the government can start, as they rebuild our roads and bridges, to put wireless electricity pads into some of this infrastructure. And again, there's already a standard for this. It's A4WP. You can actually put that standard into our roads and bridges. Well, now private industry can come in on top of that and build engines, build parts, all types of energy, and a whole bunch of ideas that we haven't even thought of yet because it has that baseline infrastructure. And that creates sustainable jobs. That is an economic stimulus that we all can partake in. By applying the theory of the drive-through window to alternative energy, local fuel, the consumer comes to you and you're fueling on the go, we're going to transform businesses, we're going to transform lives, and who knows, we may save the planet along the way. Thank you very much.